Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. On today's program, here in the latter part of April of 2015, I have a guest on that I've had on before, about 2 years ago. He is Jorge Lopez, and he's a professor of physics at UT El Paso. When I had him on the program 2 years ago, our main focus was discussing elections in Mexico, political corruption, and political reform. And we're going to pick up on that conversation today and see what has happened in the last 2 years and if some of the reforms are still ongoing or if they've been sidetracked. One side note, some of my students at community college, I let them watch some of these DVDs of some of these programs. This gentleman today that I have on, his DVD is on YouTube, Perspectives El Paso. So if you'd like to see the first program we did with Jorge Lopez, Dr. Lopez, you can do that. So you can kind of see where we were then, and you can today see where we are. This very morning, one of my students brought into the class a review of the one that he picked off YouTube was with this professor. And he wrote a full page and explained, and he told me verbally, I found this program very interesting and informative. Those were words. Dr. Lopez, good to have you back.
I'm really glad to be back.
You are interesting and informative. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't know how I feel, but I'm always interested on what is happening around me. That's for sure.
Okay. Now, in the interview we did a couple of years ago, you told us some of your background. You don't have to get into all of that now, but I'm sure that the audience, if they did not see that one, would like to know a little bit about how you got interested in politics and writing about politics. When you were here before, you had written 2 books and brought them and showed us, and then you mentioned you were working on a 3rd book. So I think the audience would like to know, what are these books about, and why did you get into writing them about political corruption elections in Mexico? Let's do that first, and then we'll talk about what's happened in the last 2 years.
Sure. There was this physicist, I don't remember exactly his name, one of the big names from the 1800s that said, if I cannot measure it, I don't understand it. Mm-hmm. So the idea is, in social sciences, you observe, you reason, and you write about it, but rarely you develop minute, detailed models that explain how things happen.
Okay.
Well, it turns out that in politics, the easy way to get into this type of analysis is through looking at the numbers, looking at elections. And when you do that, there is a new world that comes alive. And you can do many things with the numbers. You can get correlations, you can get interpolations, you can get all sorts of things that we usually use for understanding, say, the changes of temperature in the ocean. We can apply that to the data that is being provided to us by the politicians. Mm-hmm. And by the same token, you can detect irregularities, abnormalities. And with that, all of a sudden, a new field was created, especially in Mexico, because Mexico began putting partial results of the elections on the screen, on internet.
The internet's changed everything, hasn't
it? Exactly. Because somebody sitting in London all of a sudden saw something that he couldn't believe that it was real, and he began studying it. He sent me the results, mm-hmm. and it's part of one of the books. With respect to the books, the first 2 are studies of the 2006 election and the 2012 election. And the 3rd book, that it was a compendium of works done by many people, and it includes all the time before the election, during the election, and after the election. Mm-hmm. All of that information. And all of these 3 books can be found in Amazon. Just look under my name, Jorge Lopez.
Okay. You have a telephone number, a UTEP telephone number. Do you want to give that to us?
Sure,
we can scroll
yes.
It there.
It's area 915-747-7528.
Yeah, because somebody may want to call you and talk to you personally and perhaps see how they can get these and read them. Give us the title of your most recent book.
Oh, it is called Analysis of the mathematical analysis of the 2012 election.
Now, you told us before, and it seems obvious, that you love dealing with statistics. You're a numbers person. But you don't just want to memorize numbers, you're looking for correlations and you're analyzing numbers. Now, what about the last election in Mexico when Nieto, is that his name? He was elected as president, and the numbers that came out that tell you anything about that election?
It was extremely interesting because we had the experience of the 2006 election, and we were expecting kind of a repeat of the same. In other words, in 2006, it was mostly done through algorithms, changing numbers in the computer, not filling up the ballot boxes. But this time, they had a two-pronged approach. They attacked the problem from two different sides. They had the computers doing their part, but at the same time, they went on to the south of Mexico, to little towns, and they spent a lot of money buying voters, paying off people to vote, and they were, all of this is documented.
Are you talking about the PRI?
Yes, the PRI, yes, okay. The PRI. And it happened at a massive scale. Now, doing the analysis from our point of view, looking at the numbers, it looks very interesting. You can actually divide the whole election into two elections. One that is pure, pristine, without any effects, and the other one that shows all this contaminated, corrupted data that comes from buying the, some precincts had 90, 100% people voting in the whole town, which is unheard of. We on average is 30-something%.
Right,
so.
Right. Have you had anyone that took major issue with you about presenting this and writing about this? Any public officials in Mexico are upset with you and what you're writing and saying?
Well, not really. There has been a number of meetings in which we have participated in, or some of my colleagues. And of course, there's people that does not believe the numbers, and some people are on the other side. There's discussion, but nothing serious, nothing from the government. As a matter of fact, when was it? 4 weeks ago, I was invited by the Electoral Institute of the state of Chihuahua to go and give training to the people that work there about detection of fraud.
Now, I was told by a colleague wanted me to invite you back, and that's great, and follow up on this information that we had on the previous show. And I was also told that you just recently received an honor with regard to your physics. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Well, it turns out that with age, you tend to accumulate friends and honors, and that's a clear signal that I should start thinking of retiring. and I've been getting several awards at a rate of one a year, more or less. And I guess all my friends just won me out.
Well, congratulations. That tells something about your research. You are respected for your research.
Yes, I got the 2014 Mentoring Award. From the Division of Nuclear Physics of the American Physical Society. They paid my way to Kona in Hawaii to receive the award. I like that very much. But the one that I just got a week ago was in Baltimore, and this one is the Boucher Award. Okay. And the Boucher Award is more or less for lifetime achievements in nuclear physics, and it is especially given to minority physicists, Native Americans, African Americans, or Hispanics.
You want to say a word to our audience, our young audience that are now just going to college and getting their profession ahead of them there?
Sure. I never try to pull anybody into physics, to tell you the truth.
Right.
Because it's not for everybody.
Right.
But what I usually recommend is I find the apprenticeship method to be extremely well suited for all areas. If you can find, if you're a young fellow, you can find an engineer and you can tag along for a week, 2 weeks. You're going to learn way more than studying any physics course or any math course.
Right.
You will learn if you want to be an engineer. Or the same, shadowing is a common practice for high school students that are interested in medicine. So you shadow a doctor, you go here and there, and things like that. That would be the best. I did that with my two kids, my daughter and my son, and she's already a PhD in material science, and my son is getting a PhD in applied math. So
Now, for years, we had a colleague here, Emil Michael, and he had a show here on this channel with us, and he died a little over a year ago. He taught astronomy. Have you ever taught astronomy?
oh yes, yes. I was a good friend of Emil Michael's. We collaborated for some time.
Okay. That's not many people go into astronomy.
No, astronomy, the difference between astronomy and physics is that it's much easier to find employment as a physicist, because all colleges and all universities teach physics, but not all colleges and all universities teach astronomy. So it is much easier to find a job that way. But astronomy is a fascinating area because you get to confront realities, something that you would never expect to see in normal day. Like, for instance, the fact that the sun will stop shining at some point.
And then what do we do?
Yes, no, it's not going to be our problem, but you start thinking about other things. Like, for instance, just last week, the people at the Large Hadron Collider, they brought it back to life after a year or so of not working, and now they are ready to check whether there are parallel universes. Imagine, they are going to have a key measurement that will confirm that we live in one of the many parallel universes.
Okay, now let's bring it down to earth. A lot of people do not realize that government is involved in all of this. Government funds education that trains people like you and me, and so the taxpayers are paying for a lot of this, our education. Then taxpayers have helped paid for colliders, and they've helped pay for the Hubble telescope. They help pay for the rockets and all of these things that are there, and that costs money.
Oh, yes.
And it takes people that are willing to support those projects. Very important that government is definitely involved in this. Safety gets caught up in these issues.
That too.
What you're doing in physics may be very dangerous to some people, and so even safety issues. Now, back to Mexico, back down to earth in Mexico. In your last research over the last 2 years, was there one really surprising thing that you found in your research that you weren't expecting to find?
Well, we found interesting, we came up with a method to identify a way of changing numbers, which is very interesting, and it was unexpected. But other than that, it was kind of normal what we found, what we expected. It was in some cases, like for instance, the distribution of how the votes arrived at the computers. If you plot that as a function of time, turns out that the PRI, the votes for the PRI, arrived at the computer with the same functional form, exactly the same as in 2006, which is impossible to believe, because this time they had 9 million votes more than in 2006. So that was telling us that they were manipulating the numbers through computers, and they were using the same algorithm, the same software that they used in 2006. But the biggest surprise from my point of view is the fact that they went back to the old tricks of giving money to people for allowing them to keep their electoral card and vote for them on behalf of them.
Recently there was a news report, and I don't remember exactly where it was or what election was being held, but on national news they were referring to some place that had an election, and it had a problem with hacking. And so they actually had to shut it down and go back to the old method of paper ballots to solve that problem. Are we in danger from hackers in almost every election that comes up here or in Mexico?
Oh, well, not in Mexico, because they haven't started using electronic voting yet. But here in the States, there was a court case in which an engineer was summoned, and he testified that he had developed a software to rig the votes. It was in Ohio, in the 2000 election or 2004 election, one of those. So yes, there is of course that danger, But at the same time, there's open source software that can be used to prevent that. It's just a matter of convincing Diebold and all those companies to install the open source code.
So you think we'd still be safer with electronic processing and voting over the old paper ballot way? Besides, we have such a massive population. How could we do paper ballots in all of these elections?
Well, I think that we should always, we should do both. And we should keep the papers as a backup check in case that the electronic happens to be very close. And usually there are statistical methods that can give you an idea of what to expect. And if you don't get, in the actual counting, you don't get what you expect, then you should always have a backup, the paper ballots to go back and count them.
So you have all of the records from the past, or as far back as they've been kept, and then you can compare what this election is doing and realize there's something wrong with this one.
Yes, or for instance, you can do, if you do a survey ahead of time, and you survey a good chunk of people in a district, you're going to get very good results. And anything deviating for more than 2-3% should cut our attention.
Okay. Now, no, this is a program in which there are opinions. You can express these opinions, as I mentioned a while ago. Do you have an opinion about the power of the cartels in influencing some of these elections in recent days in Mexico?
Well, I don't have to express my own opinion. I can give you facts.
Okay, give me some facts.
Right now, as we speak, in Spain, there is a court case in which an operator, a Mexican operator, transferred money from unknown sources to a bank in Spain and then back to Mexico for people to buy the voting cards in the south of Mexico. So all of that is happening in Spain, whereas the main effect happened in Mexico. And in Mexico, the Federal Institute, the Electoral Institute, said that there had been no abuses with respect to the money that was used for the election, that they didn't find any irregularities. Imagine, the thing is happening in Mexico, and we have to wait until another country goes into checking all of that. Now, what are they checking? Money laundering.
Laundered money, yeah.
And they are sure that the money came from the cartels. And in Spain, they are sure that the money came from the cartels, and of course, they are creating this case.
Do you think that the lack of education in the general population of Mexico is a big problem here? Because a lot of the people just want to be left alone, just to find a way to feed their families and cover their heads with shelter. And they're not really interested in all of the corruption that's going on in Mexico.
Well, there has been an awakening in Mexico in the last 12 years, I believe.
Good.
And if you see the people protesting on the streets, you can see huge masses that you would be hard pressed to find them anywhere else. And you can find 1-2 million people protesting on the major square in Mexico, and 1-2 million people, you don't get them in the States or in Canada that easily.
Is that getting the attention of people that run elections in Mexico? Is it sending a signal?
Well, what happens is that they are learning to ignore things. In the past, they used to get scared. They used to put a remedy to things. But nowadays, they are learning that if you just bombard the population with whatever they want to put on TV. Propaganda, and they just don't pay attention to that, they can get away with it.
Well, you mentioned in a previous show something about Nietos' wife, a celebrity, an entertainer, and the masses of people were attracted to that image.
Yeah.
And you think that helped him to get elected?
Oh, yes. And now it's kind of ruining his image.
Oh, yes.
And
tell us about what the problem is.
Well, this is very interesting, but at the same time, it's extremely sad. Turns out that one of the promises of Peña Nieto was to build one of those high-speed rails between two major cities in Mexico, and they wanted to do the contract with a Chinese company, But the company that was in the middle was a specific company from the state of Mexico, and when Peña Nieto was the governor of the state of Mexico, which surrounds the Mexico City, and apparently this company gave a house to the wife of Peña Nieto, and it was a huge mansion. Was a huge house, valued in I don't know how many millions of dollars.
Well, that got the public's attention.
Well, turns out that yes, it did. But at the same time, they found that the same company had given a kind of a similar house to the Secretary of Economy in Mexico, and they began. I mean, a team of investigative reporters began finding, little giveaways here and there, or major giveaways here and there, and then the company for which these reporters were working, fired them. And in response, the major journalist that was the supervisor of the other reporters resigned, and that caused a big problem for the media because Cristina Aristegui is just about the most famous reporter in Mexico. And she is the one that was in charge of the whole investigation, and she ended up resigning. And they came up with all sorts of excuses about why they had fired the reporters. But in the end, there's no way back. And now all of that appears to be tied with one of the reforms, the telecommunications reforms, that apparently the president didn't like what these guys were putting on the screen, and forced the company, or made a deal with the company, the Multivisión, to do an exchange. Get rid of these people, and in return we're going to give you a chunk of the band for the digital stations that are about to come up on the air.
Sweetheart deal.
Something like that.
Now, when you're reading the Mexican news and you're sitting there and you run across these things, do you have kind of an aha moment? Aha, I told you that was what was going on. Or
No.
aha, I suspected that's what was going on.
No, it takes forever, to tell you the truth, because it is very hard to get enough facts in a single source. So what you have to do is, I'm telling you this now after, 3 months that they discovered the deal of the houses.
Right.
So you have to investigate here and get a little bit from there, and this is how you construct a whole picture.
Well, that made news in the United States, too. That was in our media that they were
Yeah.
telling the story of what was going on down there. Now, in general, are you optimistic or pessimistic about good things happening in Mexico as we move along? Changes that are positive. Are you positive or are you kind of negative?
Well, I have to base my judgment on my experience with the electoral fraud.
Okay.
With the electoral fraud, we determine by different ways that doesn't matter what the opposition does, they will never reach power, because they have the main control of all the ingredients that are needed to make it to the presidency, for instance.
So the elite controls the media, they control the banking system, they control the industrial system.
They control the tribunals, the electoral tribunals.
Okay.
And that's the key. Doesn't matter what you prove, doesn't matter what evidence you have of electoral fraud, if the tribunal says that it didn't happen, then it didn't happen. And there's nothing that can, there is no higher law that can make them change their minds.
Well, you just answered that question, and you are pessimistic about this.
Exactly. Yeah. So, unfortunately. Now, with respect to the reforms, I'm not that pessimistic. I think that things are happening, and we don't have enough information yet. I have my cheat sheet here.
Okay,
with,
cheat sheet.
With all the different facts. Just to remind you, we have Mexico embarked on reforming the Constitution on 11 areas, general areas. One was energy, the other one was telecommunications, education, electoral, etc. And it has been, for some of those reforms, it has been 2 years since they began operation. All right, but for the rest, they are newer, so we don't have enough information yet. But in energy, they were having a garage sale with Pemex. And Pemex, is this Mexican company, oil company, that in 2004 was the second largest in terms of earnings next to ExxonMobil. So that tells you the health of the Mexican industry at the time. It was doing very well if you compare it to other companies. But at the same time, Peña Nieto wanted to attract investments into the area. And basically they changed the law to allow private companies to do just about anything that they wanted. Prospecting, extracting, refining, plastics, anything. And the only thing that they had to do basically is pay for the oil they extract and pay the government, because the Mexican government owns all the water and all the oil, everything in the under the earth. So one of the problems with the reform has been that the price of the oil fell in the last year. So
worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide.
Okay.
And we have been enjoying cheap gasoline prices because of that. And fracking is the new buzzword in this field. There is a new way of extracting oil in places that you never expected. And because of that, there is less interest from these big companies to invest in Mexico, apparently. And they haven't realized the growth in employment and the growth in revenues that they expected. And it has been 2 years now. So from that point of view, I suppose that things will bounce back at some point, and people will want to invest in Mexico.
They ask you to come to Mexico and do one thing to reform the system. What would it be? Would it be with the Electoral Commission? You would change the Electoral Commission?
I would definitely put extra supervision on that. I would change the rules for electing members of the Electoral Tribunal, and then I would leave it to democracy to change things the way they should.
Well, very good. I've enjoyed having you here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
A second act. There's always room for a second act. We're glad you're here. And we hope that those that watch today, if they want to, they can go to that YouTube site and they can look for that and watch your first interview. That would be good to put those two together. So again, thank you for coming. I'm Leon Blevins, Perspectives El Paso.